days late, and happy St. Patrick's Day a few days early. I'm delighted to be here. It's a different format, I think, from our other meetings. We're getting very professional and very moving along. So it's lovely, and it's lovely to see such, a gathering. It's the numbers that are here. And, there can't be anything more important for you and for Ireland and for the world than women taking charge of their own emancipation and moving it along, because it is the most urgent thing in the whole world. If the planet is to be saved, it is women being emancipated can achieve that. And we have the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. They're the goals that the United Nations, realising the state the planet is in, that in 2016, the 200 countries of the United Nations, but they had started a Beijing thing on women's issues, and then we had Millennium Goals in 2000, and they had a 15-year plan. But a lot of the things were not achieved. There were some moves forward in legislation for women, but then in the 2015 United Nations, they spent a very long time. They have these big discussions from September to Christmas, in which they are taking everyone's reporting from the countries, how things are going. So the ambassador to the United Nations from Kenya and from Ireland, they spent 6 months working out what might be the essential things that would save the planet or what's needed. So they're what I call them, in our Christian thing, not sure you've all heard it all the same anyway, the 10 Commandments. So these are the 17 commandments that we needed for now. And what has to be achieved is, I don't know if you all know them or not, but it's, what's the first one? No poverty, no hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, clean and affordable energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation, infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible production and consumption. And then there are for the climate change, there are 3. Action for climate change, and then on sea and on land, and then we have peace, justice, and strong institutions, and then cooperation for those. Now that is the task of the world, and every country is tasked with it, and every department in all the different departments and everything, they're all responsible for this. So it really is a two-way thing from global level down, but it has to go right down to the most basic level in one's own home, in one's knowledge, in increasing one's knowledge. In everything one does, one has to check it against this. And you hear it, like the words that have come into the vocabulary, like the well-being, the sustainability, all of those, the responsible consumption, and then is recycle, reuse, fast fashion going out of things, all these kind of things. But they're all kind of little movements. It's having effect, but it's really 5 of those ones that I mentioned are to do with women, and they are where the women have been, and if I say abused, discriminated against, or have not been allowed to become emancipated, and very much we say in, a lot of African countries, other countries where the women do all the work, but they don't have the ownership of the land, and it can be sold over their heads, or all of these, as food becomes the big, with climate change, the big thing in the world, water and food, you'll have big powers coming in, buying the land, doing the thing, and people being tricked into selling the thing because the woman doesn't own it, the thing, and then, so there's really, really so much awareness that we have to be no longer just sitting, and we really all have to be just so aware and watching everything that's happening in the world, so we're really able to, and I felt that's what was happening here today. I thought it was so moving that people were just so conscious, and that young person that came up flying on all cylinders and about the food, because one of the really, really important things, and my husband, he spoke at the United Nations, this last session was on food security, and he spoke at it, but there was a woman from, was it El Salvador, the Argentine, who said the biggest food security thing in the world is breast milk. Breastfeeding. Billions would save the economies, and the health, the well-being, everything else. And the United Nations have done the research over the years. 6 months exclusive breastfeeding with nothing else. Mother is passing on all of the immunities, and in the first days it just needs the serum, and that is what will prevent obesity later on. And this, can you imagine people now fleeing in Ukraine and in all the other countries where there's millions and millions of refugees moving? If you have your food security in your breasts, you know, rather than a lot of the problems of the world is formula, and Ireland really are part of it because of our dairy thing. A lot of our exports are formula, powder, you know, these. And going to countries like Pakistan and lots of other places where the medical people, because they're always ones pushing medical people to promote things and inviting them to conferences or giving them this and that, so that they encourage them to use these. Now they use that and they have their bottle and they have that, but the water they're getting is contaminated. So the babies, they suffer all kinds of diseases. So really, that's one of the, but I'm just saying this because there's, I feel the breastfeeding, I'm particularly interested since I became, went to the Oras, every 1st of October to the 10th is breastfeeding week. So I have latching on, where you have 100 mothers coming and all, and it's gained in strength, and we have such good now that I'm sure you're part of it, or if not, the groups, the Quidju. Quidju is the Irish word for helping. So mothers who started breastfeeding, then they start reaching out and helping others to know, because the big tragedy in Ireland, because we were such a repressed, I mean, I breastfed my children in 1974, years before any of your mothers were even thought of, I suppose. But there was nothing, not a word about breastfeeding. I think the doctors even, they were so repressed. I don't think they were able to say the word breast, you know. It is really true. They're really true, the repression that has been in this country from the church thing and everything. Whereas in my mother's time, like there were 7 in our family, we were all breastfed for 2 years. And we had natural family planning, because if you breastfeed for a year exclusively, you know, you won't old age, you won't become pregnant.
Yes.
And that would have been for our grandmothers and great-grandmothers back through the millennia. People being on earth, women being, anybody being on earth, it's because they were breastfed. Human milk, the most precious thing in the world, and thrown away by a few people who want to make money out of saying this is the best for you. And you see it all the time. I can't believe it. So many times a day you have Aptamilk and these coming on saying, and they're calling it follow on, and they're showing their baby the thing. Where are our health one? Where are we putting ads on the television telling us? And I so agree with it. So little information that we have. You have all kinds of silly programs on well, not grand, Dancing with the Stars and all these, paid fortunes for those. They would make homemade programs on teaching people about their money, about their bodies, about their breasts, about their health, and people being familiar, with all of this. The physiology, it's just what I was saying, to know. I mean, I got Leaving Cert honours in physiology. I did my Leaving Cert. I had carpals and metacarpals and fibulas. I had no genitalia. I had no such thing as anything down there. And I went and having my baby, and I was with the obstetrician, and I was calling it, when I was young, an anus or something. I remember in a play I was doing the thing, and I was talking about a vagina, because I'd never heard of a vagina. I mean, really, the neglect, and the neglect of mothers not passing on this. So that's really, all the work has to come on people being confident, knowing their bodies, and then having the knowing that their human rights, their civil rights, their rights and their dignity as a human being, and the boundaries that are around them, and their authenticity and the sacredness of that, and being able to know, if you know all the language is so important. If you don't know the words for your body, you're at a disadvantage. If you know all of those things, you're in a position to talk about what it is you want and about you, and you're able to defend your point of view. You're not so much as the bullying is pressure. I mean, it has been right through for women. They're being pressured about the billions into doing things, consenting to things that is not consent at all. It's just, they're just being told that's the way, or you're frigid, you're frigid, or this, you're that, you're not with it, Whereas in fact, if they know have their authenticity and their rights and their everything else, that it's the best protection and the best way they'll enjoy themselves, because they will be so secure. So I'm involved in education as well, and I really feel our education system needs that kind of level to it of teaching young people to think. There's a big program now that's starting in some countries. It's P4C, philosophy for children. And it is really getting them to think. Children have all kinds of questions, but all our educational system has been pouring from our glass into theirs with no questions asked. Whereas they have loads of things that they're curious about. And in this P4C, they're just sitting around with weight bags, and they're thinking of what is it, they have questions, and they ask, and then they choose one, and then all the children think about that. And they're just absolutely wonderful. And there's a new, a scientist of the year every spring they have started doing now for the philosophy of the year. I was part of the one of it, which has been taken over now in UCD. They run it now, and schools around the country, so many, more and more of them are taking part, and children from all the different stages of primary and secondary, they submit things, and they have their big display in the RDC, what do you call it?
The RDS.
RDS on that. So I'm going on, but I really think that it's women, the emancipation of women, and that is what the world, then it's actually acknowledged. Those economies around the countries, around the world, where there's a lot of macho cultures and that, it's a known goal for them. They're repressing, like the gender violence when I was in Africa, like the gender violence in South America. A lot of gender violence in those. And I know that in some of the schools, some of the countries we were in, I think in Malawi, that there were universities had started doing courses where people were trained that they would go out and talk to people and were able to get the couple, you know, there's so much is domestic violence, you know, it's hugely this, you know, we were the thing from Adam and Eve that Adam and Eve that caused all the trouble, you know, in the garden, that she gave him the apple and it caused our agony. And there wasn't a woman that had the first baby. He took a limb, a bone from the man. And from the beginning of time, they've been trying to say, no, women are there for the use of men. Whereas in fact, women can keep humanity going. And there were a few men. Do you know what I mean? That we've gone through that kind of, that has to come across, or else this is for the survival of the planet. The economies in those places are ruined by that. So there's so much work being done, but the United Nations and the Sustainable Development Goals, so I think to really encourage it being in the school, I think a lot of young people now do have more understanding about climate change. But a lot of it's really important to encourage it, and you know, that at every level, being on parents' councils in schools, and I must say, I think the way the world is in, for me, integrated education is, and I'm glad that at last our bishops are moving away. They've given consent now that it will be the parents will be the patrons, that you will have it integrated. Because we go to some schools and there are 40 different nationalities in it. I mean, Ireland has changed so much, and it's just wonderful, the enrichment of that. You have all religions and all people from everywhere, and it's just so lovely to see the enrichment that is. So anyway, I know I've worn you all out. So, and that's, I didn't know what I was going to be talking about, but I was inspired by our midwife. Midwives, one of the big things. I'd love if all the groups here would join in with some of those, the breastfeeding groups. They're all on the website, the Quidju. You know, a group can join Quidju, Friends of Breastfeeding. There's the women, the law group that are monitoring and trying to stop those baby ones advertising the thing, making sure that they observe the United Nations Code on advertising rather than leading women astray, saying this is the best. So there's a lot out there, but it'd be great if everyone joins doing such a support, you know, because what we need to get, and there's Banibaha are doing a survey at the moment where people are saying their experience, because the experience of people in hospital is there are not enough midwives. The midwives haven't time. One time you were in hospital when people had a baby, you had 14 days lying in day. Then in my time there was about 4 or 5 days. Now you're in and you're out, and they haven't time for the latching on, for the, you know, and they haven't, midwives, the training ahead of time, like the girl was saying, before you have you're right through before birth, and once you or even of course from school and all the training, but once you go to, most people will go to a doctor when they become pregnant. It's his job to tell people about getting in touch with a midwife, doing all the course, and they don't even have it in their training, doctors, so they know nothing. Imagine, they know nothing about breastfeeding. They don't say a word, nothing to do. And there's a very good doctor in Limerick, Dr. O'Shea, he's the HSE, but he's trying to push that. But really, we have an awful lot to do with the lowest number in Ireland of all Europe. Up in Sweden, 90%, and the Nordic countries, 85 and 90% are breastfeeding. Here in Ireland, we have, I think, about 46 or something. And even if they do it, start when they leave the hospital, because there isn't, the midwife should be there afterwards, before, in the hospital, the one they know, and at home. The most important person in the hospital, you know, for that area is it, and there aren't enough. So we're kind of, that's my biggest, and I'd love anyone to take part in it, campaign, more midwives, plenty of midwives. So anyway, happy meeting with you all. And thank you for